Hello, everyone. Thank you for sticking around. Or if you're watching this in the future, thank you for finding our YouTube channel, browsing the library, and ending up on this video. However you got to us, whether it was, hey Joe.
Hi. Bye.
But however you got to us, whether it was from within the Zoom itself, whether you found us live or whether you found us in library afterwards. Thank you for being here. This is Highwire Improv, and this is our semi-regular talk program, Walking the Talk, where we get to meet with people who are involved in the improv community from all over the world, working in theater organizations, nonprofits, as members of those organizations themselves, to talk about how we can all work in the improv space, in the improv community in better ways, being more inclusive, being more equitable, advancing the state of both online and offline improv, and really tips and tricks and practical things we can all do to be better improv stewards for this wonderful world. And I am super excited to have our guest tonight, William Rowe from Lancaster Improv Players. He is a wonderful person who is prolific in many ways. We're going to learn about him and his organization, and it's going to be a fun conversation. Thanks for joining us. And William, come on out here, please. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Highwire audience. How you doing?
They're good.
They're right behind you. They get to see the back of your head, and I get to see the front of your head. That's how the internet works, right?
That's how the internet works, exactly. I actually did see a show that took advantage of that in this wonderful virtual space, which we're diving right into it. But there was a show that Impromptu did. They're a trio out of Florida, and they have two people in one room and another person in another space, and they use the kind of fourth wall as if it were one half, like the two people were on one half of the room and the other person was on the other half of the room. They actually kind of created this cool shared space,
Nice.
which was really, really neat. And it's just one of the amazing good things we've all learned in the last 13 months, hopefully. I'm getting ahead of myself. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, your role in the organization, whatever comes to mind as an intro for the internet who may not know you.
Ooh, rambling about myself. Not
Yes,
much.
please.
But hi, I'm William Rowe. William Rosenwinkel for people in real life, but on Facebook I'm William Rowe. So that easy common thing. I'm used to it now. I'm good with it. I have been improvising for. I should have had the spreadsheet up earlier. I keep a lot of things in spreadsheets.
Yes.
I was an accountant for many years, and now I work in IT dealing with accounting people as part of my day job.
Yeah.
I've been improvising for 4 years, 9 months. Come on, spreadsheet. 29 days. So
Excellent.
that is how long I've been improvising. I started improvising in Harrisburg at the Harrisburg Improv Theater. I have expanded to taking workshops all over the place, as many places as I could. I joined up with Lancaster Improv Players personally about 2.5 years ago, I want to say. I have the date in here somewhere. Da-da-da. But, yeah, I was not one of the original ones with Lancaster Improv Players. They formed about, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago now. I'm getting a bit fuzzy because the last year is either one really long month, one really short month, or 10,000 years. It's kind of, a mess like that.
We just passed March 400th recently.
Oh, goodness, yeah. It's probably been about that long since I've had caffeine. Anyway, weird markers that I've been counting from this.
Yeah.
Anyway, also spreadsheets. But, yeah. Presently, I am a coach of a team for Lancaster Improv Players. I'm a performer on a handful of teams that are online, a slightly different set of teams when I'm in person.
Yeah.
Some of those are TBD, what their status really is, because we didn't all make the journey into online improv together. So, things like that have happened. And again, March 400th, as you said. I am on the board of directors for Lancaster Improv Players. We're a nonprofit. We became officially an independent nonprofit in March of 2019. So we've been, I guess it's about 2 years now.
Yeah.
For their nonprofit status. We opened a theater at what seemed like a good time. Little did we know. In August of 2019, we were open for about what is that, 6 months, six,
Yeah.
7 months
Yeah.
before shutting down for COVID. And then we were asleep for a little bit while figuring some things out. And now we've come back online. And we're trying to make a go of it with online and trying to do that mostly for the community aspect.
Yeah.
Keep the community together, kind of try and keep this fledgling young organization that really has grown a lot since we found a space and opened a theater. We were kind of overrunning the space that we had for practices prior to that. So space is an interesting lever
Yeah.
to pull. But I've rambled now.
Sufficient rambling. That's a wonderful introduction. So, as kind of an entry point, like you have certainly embraced the online improv in a way that many have, but not all. And I saw kind of maybe connected to your tracking of spreadsheets that I saw in a post recently a very large number related to the number of online classes or workshops that you have taken in the past 13 months. If you have the number, great, but I understand it's quite high, and I'm curious if that's become like a collecting thing or what's kind of promoted that in you.
I do have the number. It's 104 workshops that I've taken.
Nice.
Plus 2 or 3. I taught 2 multi-week classes.
Yeah.
I've taken a couple multi-week classes in addition to that. So it's 104 just drop-ins or workshops. It's an extension of what I was doing prior in real life.
Yeah.
I followed the Hideout a lot, and when the Hideout went online very early, I leapt in because I'm like, ooh, they're in Austin, Texas. I can't get down there very often. I will get to see friends and people that I like that I don't get to see very often and learn from them. And they've been figuring out this online thing. So I dove in hard, and I've taken all sorts of online workshops with all sorts of people. I am a firm believer that you can learn improv from anyone, and everyone has something that they can teach you in improv.
Yeah.
Not all people are properly trained to be teachers. Not all people. I don't want to stop people from becoming teachers. I just think they should get that training or some of that guidance before they teach necessarily. But I want everybody to feel like they can share their knowledge, that they can bring that to their. And I also want to learn from everybody that I can, because there's so many people that in improv tend to idolize individual names, or they come up with somebody and they have a very reverent view of them, and that can lead to some interesting behaviors or some toxic behaviors or some things that don't necessarily mesh well with them as a player personally. That I find the more diverse set of teachers that I have, the more I'm finding out what works for me and figuring out how to be the best improviser that I can be as myself.
Yeah.
And to get as many different diverse perspectives to see what clicks and how it lands. Because sometimes, I'm sure you've had this, sometimes you learn a lesson in improv and you've heard it 24 times before, but it didn't really click until this person said it on this day in this environment, because that was when it was finally your mind was ready for it, or what your body or whatever was ready for it. Like yes and you've heard it 100 times, but somebody said something and now poof, it's been broken apart and reformed into something different.
Yeah, I absolutely relate to that, and it's interesting how somehow, and this is probably true of other disciplines too, but like some of these guidelines or rules have been accepted by people or schools as 2 things that I think are incorrect. One, that they're like cut and dry, like they're always true or they're not always true. And 2, that they're simple, right? The concept of yes and, while it can be expressed simply in 2 words, in practice is incredibly complicated to actually do. And in different situations, it's not always kind of the same, technique or method that you might use to do that effectively. And so you can learn a rule like yes and 20 different times and add kind of structure and texture to it, just like you can learn how to play music. And you might learn how to play a G chord on the guitar, but there are so many more components to doing that you can continue to learn throughout your life. And I don't see that ever stopping.
Me either. I hope to never stop learning, because improv is technically a death march. There is no finish line, which is mildly depressing.
It's helpful to understand our place in the world. That's reasonable.
It's interesting. Yeah.
And I also like the idea that you can learn improv from you can learn something about improv from anybody, and whether they've been trained to teach is one thing, but that's a really I think healthy view that we are all bringing something to this collaborative art form. So,
And you don't even necessarily realize you're bringing to it, because I feel like you can learn
right.
something from watching something. There's definitely like the science behind it of the mirror neurons, where once you're tuned into improv, your brain's going, ooh, that kind of move, that whatever.
Yeah.
You've done this, you're analyzing, you're thinking about it differently. But from other performers, you can learn things like, ooh, that was really cool. I like that. I want to do that.
Yeah.
Or talk to them about it. You can learn about it formally in teachers and from your other classmates and all these other things. And sometimes the lesson you're learning is what not to do,
That's true. Yeah.
which is a perfectly valid thing. And I would rather you learn what not to do from somebody else's mistake than repeat that mistake yourself.
Absolutely.
But, I think there are a lot of people who are newer in improv that feel like they don't necessarily have a voice to share yet, and
Yeah.
have like the structure to express that voice or
Mm.
formally like teach through that voice, but they definitely have how improv works for them, because I think you're only going to ever be the best improviser that you can be as Barry, and nobody else can ever. You can teach people for thousands and thousands of hours. They will never be the exact same improviser as you because they have a
Right.
different life experience. So they shouldn't try to be an improviser. They shouldn't try to be a Barry improviser. They should try to
Right.
be some improviser. And you can definitely try and go, hey, here's doors that works for me. Follow
Yeah.
my stuff, whether it's formally through teaching, informally through being like on a team with them or what have you.
Yeah. It's interesting to think through that. And what I've really liked about the online experience is it's at least the components that I've involved myself with have taken a shift towards workshops versus classes. And I know some organizations are doing the kind of core curriculum classes, but that workshop model seems to really encourage that lifelong development, that picking and choosing to develop you as an improviser, as opposed to a core curriculum which you complete to move on, right, and to earn performance time or get the certificate or whatever that is. And there's certainly value to structured education and structured scaffolding of learning, but I see a lot of pre-pandemic theaters focus so much on this is our core 5 classes. We'll do electives from time to time, but there's mostly a focus on that. And I'm curious, even financially, if there's a model that will work better, that is more fluid and shifts towards more instructors, more topics, a little bit more of a self-directed improv education rather than this very rigid school-based one.
There were some schools that had some really interesting ideas that I never got to like properly dissect a curriculum.
Yeah.
One of them was in Florida. It was ad lib comedy.
Hmm.
They had basically like an intro to improv, and then instead of having truly leveled classes, they had some sort of just like focused classes.
Yeah.
So like it'd be like a class on edit, a class on this, a class on that, and they weren't really like hierarchical. It was just like you work your way through that path in whatever order makes sense to you or whatever order is on offer.
Yeah.
I always need to dissect that better.
Yeah. It's an interesting model, and it's a concept we've actually kicked around Highwire about having those kind of just like skill focused classes that repeat on some cadence. And it's kind of like building up like your skill tree in like a video game, where you can kind of decide I'm going to get really good at initiations, and I'm going to you have people who play video games and like I'm going to know how to use the sword so well, and I'm not going to leave the first level until my sword is perfect. And then you have people who are like, I'm going to go fight the boss now, and I'm going to do one defensive class, and that's it. But there are like all these different choose your own adventure approaches that you could take. I like that model, especially if there's a good way to pair it with the community aspect. Like, how do you have more veteran improvisers help guide people looking at that menu of opportunities and say, oh yeah, I've seen you do improv before, you might benefit from this. And that, like, that'd be really cool and kind of democratize the guidance of people through that in a way that we don't have today.
Definitely. I can see that.
I'm curious, having taken so much education online over the past year, I won't ask you kind of what your favorite workshops were, but I wonder if you have a perspective on things that were unique, unique approaches or unique topics that you thought were interesting and maybe worth sharing.
I have a lot of weird thoughts, and I've never gathered them together. So Da, 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 da. I've seen a lot of different approaches to it, and to a greater or lesser extent, I've seen a couple people who are very good improv teachers just trying out their first Zoom workshop, and
Yeah,
it's an interesting experience to see somebody completely competent with a lesson to give just struggling,
yeah,
and recognizing that. But I don't know. I haven't figured out like a good approach for how to answer that.
yeah,
I think a couple of the things that have been surprisingly effective for me for online workshops is you have an immediate availability of diverse teachers
yeah,
that you don't necessarily have through any other means. Like even in pre-pandemic days, you were lucky if twice a year you had an extra 5 teachers from lands afar come visit your
hmm,
area if you had a festival. If you
right,
did not have a festival, you might get 1 or 2 a year who were going
yeah,
through on a tour and
yeah,
stumbled across your theater somehow and connected and were able to negotiate something.
yeah,
Because I'm sure there's plenty of points in that where touring improvisers have failed to make that connection.
right,
Um, but now I have access to classes online in the UK. I have access in
yeah,
Austin, in California, in Portland, and all over the place. I can learn from all sorts of people, and I can try and bring in teachers from all over the place without having to pay for flights and a hotel, which
yeah,
is admittedly a giant hurdle for most improv theaters and
absolutely.
orgs, hence the festival model. Um, but in doing that, I've also noticed that I've had access to a broader diversity of teachers. Harrisburg's community is bustling but kind of small.
Yeah,
It's pretty white,
yeah,
and there's a tendency for, especially in younger scenes, for more men to become teachers than
yep.
women, at least in my experience and what I've seen. And so there tends to be a bias towards that. I've been able to work towards correcting that bias to some degree over the past 104 workshops.
Yeah, and it's really it's great both from the individual's perspective and from an organization's perspective. We've been able to do similar things at Highwire where putting on our slate of workshops, we're able to draw from people outside of the Baltimore community and therefore get perspectives and diverse instructors in a way that would have been harder, to your point, if we were in person. And we're thinking a lot about how we can maintain that once activity also begins in person. At least with our organization, we're never going to shut down the online side of things, but we also want to be able to bring some of those benefits that we saw online to our in-person world too. And that's obviously a tricky problem because you kind of revert back to the same financial hurdles.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You hope that somebody has family nearby because then they're in the area for cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really bonkers. I remember just the juxtaposition. I have a team that I work with who in January we were trading emails with the people of PGraph out of Austin, trying to bring them amazing improvisers, amazing instructors and people, amazing organizers. And we were talking about bringing them in for a weekend intensive in the summer, and just the cost of doing that is it's obviously you're paying for their expertise and the time, but then you're bringing in 4 people on flights and housing them for a weekend. It becomes quite a lot. And now it could just be the cost of the instruction and also the convenience for the 4 of them, not having to eat up a whole weekend outside their city and stuff like that. Like it's a win-win, I think, to have that as an opportunity for folks.
Knowing the instructors, I'm not sure that's necessarily the biggest win, but it definitely is a win for variety on their part.
Yeah.
I know they do enjoy their travels and meeting other improvisers and other theaters. I think one of the weak points of online is like that after class experience is kind of gone.
Yeah.
In person, you take a class together, you hang out at a diner or go to a bar and have a drink or whatever that, after class activity is, or even the before class where you get there super early because you're looking for the building because it's always a weird building.
Yep.
Or almost always a weird building. You're like, what is this thing? Okay, I'm too early, but oh, you're here early too.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll chat.
great. Yeah.
And that kind of isn't there yet. But
That's really interesting. Yeah, there's like those like weak tie connections that happen in a community like that, just hanging out at the space at the at the local bars, restaurants, coffee shops. It's interesting to see how that has in some ways been replicated or I'll say replaced with just the conversations that happen online. It has not happened it doesn't seem to have happened in any of my workshops that I've participated in the workshop experience. Like when people show up on the Zoom 10 minutes early, they don't chat in the same way, I find, than they do in person, and they don't hang out afterwards. And like I was talking with Tavish Forsyth and Kristen McKenzie, who teach classes with Bird City Improv in Baltimore, and Tavish had this nice idea of he leaves the Zoom open for the students for 30 minutes after class. And it's been mixed. Like sometimes the students really embrace that and hang out and they chat, and some classes nobody does it. And I think it's a tough sell a little bit to add more staring at rectangles time. Especially for people who have like a job where that's part of their life too. So it's interesting to see, but that again, like that's been somewhat replaced with all of the online comment threads and Facebook groups about food, and like there has been a little bit of this form. Yeah.
Oh, that Facebook is great. But yeah, it's been I find it's been interesting how many improvisers I know have gone into hibernation. And I understand that the experience of online is different than it is in person. And I think one of the greatest lessons that online improv has is it teaches you what part of improv you care about, what part of improv fuels you, what part of improv is where your joy comes from.
Yeah.
Because of those differences. Like if you find that you dig the vibe of the room, you like the dark room, the theater lights, if you're lucky, like whatever that like thing is with that space, with the buzz of an audience there or whatever, and that's like what brings you that thump in your heart for improv. Online might not do it for you in that way. Maybe like you can substitute it by seeing the chat going when the chat's really, banging and they're commenting all over the place. I have no idea what the chat's doing here today. But maybe sometimes that can fill that gap a little bit. But if you like a different side of improv, like personally I dig the connection side of it. Getting to with people, getting to be creative, getting to like spend this time locked in with you or with whomever I'm creating with. I like that connection piece, that playfulness, that camaraderie that comes from that side of it. So I get to and I don't anybody who's like online isn't for me, I'm cool with that. I don't like the people that are like online isn't improv.
Yes, agreed.
Go away, you're ableist and you're stupid.
100%.
It's improv. Improv is improv. Jazz is improv. Improv is jazz. It's just a different medium. Deal with it. It has every right to exist just because it doesn't work for you individually. I encourage people to try online improv for figuring out where that joy center is, because I think that's a really useful thing to shape what goes on. Because I've worked hard prior to here to try and not join too many things or overstretch myself because I know I can do that. And I do ridiculous things anyways, so I wanted to leave room for doing the ridiculous things I was going to do anyways, like flying away for a weekend just to take a drop-in class in the middle of Kansas City or something.
Nice.
Done that. But, like, I've seen people that, I love playing with these people, I'm going to join that team. I love playing with these people, I'm going to join that team. And then they just get fried because they weren't chasing the parts of improv that brought them joy, and they overcommitted, and they were on like 12 or 14 teams at once. It's overload, and I don't want to do that. I don't want people to do that.
Absolutely.
Rambling again. I'm good at rambling.
That's then we're going to rename the show accordingly.
It's top 10 traits.
Really? Is it like in the top half of the top 10, or is it like 8 or 9?
I have no idea. I think that sorting order of the top 10 depends on the other person
Ah, okay.
more than myself.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's really fascinating how the online version of things has changed people's behavior. To your point, like some people it hasn't worked for at all. Some people it has fueled that, that kind of negative behavior of doing too much because there is so much one can do. And a lot of this is like use this as a tool to calibrate yourself, right? Um, my hot take with online improv is uh, a live improv show that's recorded loses a lot more than an online improv show that's recorded. Like the drop off in experience from an online show being live versus watching it the next day, in my experience, is almost nothing. Whereas if I see a recording of a show that happened in a theater, watching that online later, which our theater in Baltimore used to do, they would stream all the shows. It would just wouldn't feel the same. Which I take as a challenge when we go back to in-person things to undo that. Like how can we film, how can we capture audio in such a way that those in-person shows, when recorded for future viewing, are just as good.
If you figure that out on a budget, tell me, because
Well, yeah, exactly. I feel like there's going to be this run on AV equipment that happens over the rest of 2021 because
yeah,
I think one of our kind of hypotheses for going back to in person is that there will be a demand for that kind of network of instructors from outside your city, and there will be a demand for people who will meet in a room with a virtual instructor if the quality of that communication is good, right? If the instructor can clearly see and hear everybody and the students can clearly see and hear people, I think people would absolutely show up for a workshop with somebody who wasn't physically present, especially people who had done online improv previously. But that means, high quality mics, that means high quality internet in your theater, that means, screens in rooms and stuff like that. And that is not cheap. But I think there's a path to making that part of your experience as an organization, which hopefully people will start to think through.
Yeah, I could see that. I want online improv to survive. I'm interested to see how much the flood to real life will just cull things from it being much harder to find people.
Yeah.
Because on my best day, I think about half the people that are doing online improv now are doing it because they need improv in their life.
Yeah.
That time will get replaced or supplanted with in-person stuff because they also need human contact in a different way. I could use human contact, and it's been a while. But I think it definitely has a place as a teaching tool. It definitely has a place as a performance tool.
Yeah.
It has a place, and I hope it survives well. I want to keep offering it through our theater, but we've seen some drop-offs in our capacity, and we were never as close to like the highways of known names as other ones. I feel like those that had well-known names and a mortgage leaped early on in because you had to pay the bills, and they already had the names, so other people in other cities knew about them and glommed onto it, and they were able to make more of a go of it. I'm impressed with what Highwire has done, but part of that's because you fanned out to find hundreds of teams.
Yeah. It's been a ride. It's been. That was kind of the idea was, how can we kind of achieve some kind of critical mass, right? How can we involve as many people as possible? And we were so lucky to have like a pretty serious contingent of Baltimore improvisers who were ready to jump online, that I don't know that every city had, and then add in more from other places. And I think that's kind of also part of the path for what online improv will look like in a year from now. Like a lot of theaters will heavily pull back from that because they'll be focused on their in-person activities, but there'll be people in each of those communities who want to continue doing online improv, and there'll be a smaller number of online hubs that pull people from all over the world, like socially distant improv, and like some of those other organizations that maybe are rooted in one community but have now expanded to be national or global in some way. That kind of community, I feel like, will continue to exist, but maybe not that plus every other local theater doing their own online thing. There might be some consolidation there.
I was really hoping online would be normalized enough that it would keep going, where every theater has their thing. Because I think
I hope so too.
it's interesting being in a smaller community, like having come up in Harrisburg. It's
Yeah,
like 50 to 70 active improvisers that were there.
yeah,
They didn't mix as often with other communities, so it was a fairly um, not isolated is not quite the right word for it, but they were somewhat isolated in terms of
yeah.
like the stylistic influence and stuff.
Right.
And then you get a guest improviser through, would come drop a workshop, and you'd see like a wave. All of a sudden, like all of a sudden, wow, there's 10 different teams doing follow the lever, or something like that. Where all this like
Yeah,
hot thing comes, and you see this like flare up in a wave, and it's interesting to see that as opposed to stuff that's a little bit more connected.
yeah,
It's a little bit more steady state, kind of more flow through some of those things rather than waves.
yeah.
Rambling, I don't know.
Yeah,
I have a lot of ideas. They're poorly collated.
I understand. I resemble that remark. It is, it's just a lot to consider. I mean, it's still such a young art form, a young organizational, experience, and there's so many more things to try and learn. So hopefully people will continue doing that.
Oh yes, never
Yeah,
stop.
yeah. It's I'm curious, coming from a smaller community and smaller theater compared to some of the larger ones out there. Yeah, you've partnered with some other organizations to be part of bigger things like the Everybody Got in Here Festival, which was amazing.
Yeah,
That's another aspect I hope to see kind of continue beyond the return to in-person activity, because prior to the pandemic there was very little collaboration between organizations that I was able to see. I'm curious if you felt that too, or if not, what you were doing, pre-pandemic in terms of partnering. But I hope that continues.
I would love to see that continue. Definitely. I I've seen various things on the spectrum of that. Austin, Texas, is one of the best ones for
Yeah,
having like a partnership between the various theaters, which I wish I could pour one out for the various ones that have passed on now
yeah,
in there, which is unfortunate. But they had 5 different theaters, one of which for a while chose to self-isolate because they were not in the best mindset from their leadership.
yeah, yep,
Not my story to tell, but definitely don't need that to ever happen again. But their replacement theater, the one that grew up from there, the fallout of that, embraced that. They've got the Austin improv community as like a larger thing, and the improvisers from all 5 core theaters then freely went back and forth, learned at classes everywhere, performed
yeah.
everywhere. Good relationships between the theater owners, from what I understood. It seemed like a
Mm,
great supportive scene overall. And then
that's
there's
amazing.
the various waves of like Chicago with the deep-seated rivalries where,
Yeah,
ooh, the annoyance broke out of IO. Now they hate each other for 10 years and they don't talk to each other until finally some generation later, who has forgotten about it, decides to have like a Romeo Juliet type thing where they form a duo with somebody and somehow they're like on speaking terms again, but they're still not necessarily entwined.
yeah,
Uh, Having experience in Harrisburg and in Lancaster, our neighbors are far. Not that far, but like when your neighbor's 40 minutes away, there's not a huge amount of opportunities to
right.
collaborate in like a more formal sense. Everybody get in here was a bit of luck, a bit of magic, or something that we got to go along with that.
Yeah,
And June 4th to 13th,
that's
save the
right.
date. But it's a beautiful thing that we've been able to collaborate so much with so many different theaters all over the place through that.
Yeah,
And I want to see stuff like that continue, definitely.
yeah. It's
It,
it's amazing. Yeah. God.
it just feels like it's when you're in your zone, you have a limited amount of time capacity and things to
Mm,
commit to stuff. So it becomes very easy to go, oh, I'm now a theater rat and I'm just at the Harrisburg Improv Theater every weekend. Um, I think I
Yeah.
was there almost every Friday for 3 years.
Yeah.
You know, being a theater rat. But, it's hard to get from there to other theaters. And I had a unique opportunity to do that. So I would do that, mostly hitting festivals. But trying
Yeah.
to go around and experience that is great. Love it. If you get a chance, if you're ever traveling and you're an improviser and you find a local improv theater, see if there's a drop-in class or anything,
Yeah.
because the experience is typically magical, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You hang out afterwards as you do like in your normal area, but it feels very much like you're home again because you're playing with
Mm,
improvisers, and there's a tendency for like that improviser spirit to just feel
yeah.
like home. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, and you talked about taking classes with theaters from the UK. One of my favorite improv experiences ever was I had taken a work trip to London in 2018 and got to do a drop in and a jam at Hoopla, who I've now taken classes with online. But that you're totally right. That environment of being kind of with like-minded people in a new place is just it's it's awe-inspiring in terms of like what improv can be as a community and as an artistic concept, which is really cool. And I really kind of connect with your point about like neighbors are far away. Here in Baltimore, we're only 45 minutes from Washington D.C. and
hmm
and Washington Improv Theater, and it was surprisingly hard to mix those communities. You have some people who happen to live halfway between who do things at both, but
yeah,
most do, 95% plus at one or the other because it's just too much to do that. And in Baltimore, we'd have, shows in two venues. We had Charm City Comedy Project and Baltimore Improv Group, and you could feasibly do a show at each in one night. And people did that. But, when you start to have like DC in there, it's like, we're going to dedicate the weekend to going to this show at WIT or Dojo or Unified Scene or, any of the other theaters down there. But it's far away. It's far enough away.
yeah.
And,
It doesn't
I
have to
think
be very far for it to be far enough away.
exactly. But with online, it's nowhere is too far, except for potentially time zone issues, depending on how you value the regularity of your sleep. Um,
And things like daylight saving time popping
oh,
and ruining your life sometimes.
yes.
You know, there's a 2 week difference between when daylight savings happens.
That's the
Sometimes your
best.
plans can overlap and get messed up.
Yes, they can. Um, we should be the group who lobbies Congress to finally abolish daylight savings time. It should be improvisers who finally convince the government.
Oh goodness, if we did that, we could implement improv standard time, which is usually 5 minutes late.
It's so funny. I have noticed. I'm curious what your experience over a much larger sample set is. I have noticed improv standard time has been better online than in person.
Overall, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, which I guess makes sense because there's no commute, but still, it's interesting to see. It's interesting to know that we can do it. We are capable of doing it if we choose.
Part of me suspects that the commitment level for failure to attend is
a little survivorship bias. Yes.
Yeah, so there's definitely a survivorship bias there because, yeah, like if you've forgotten it, you've probably completely forgotten it, and you realize that like, oh crap, I was supposed to be. Oh, it was a 90-minute workshop.
Yeah.
I've got 15 minutes. Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Not going to happen today. Yeah.
Like
so true.
Case, it's like, oh, I had to go to the bathroom. Now I'm 2 minutes late. Something like that. Like, or I just needed to finish these 4 bites before hitting it.
Yeah.
It's either that level of late or just, they can keep the money.
Yep.
Whereas the in-person stuff, I have gotten on a train, I've gotten in a car, I've done something to try and get here.
Yes, exactly. And kind of going back to the collaboration between theaters thing, it's interesting. There is this kind of this stylistic difference, or even in a city, sometimes a financial competition that I ascribe to one point of view that it's not really a competition, but I understand why somebody might think that. but I really want to see more theaters kind of as we go, further along, collaborate on things like best practices. It's absurdly inefficient that we've all tried to come up with a code of conduct on our own. Yes, we should have things that are specific to our community, but the fact that we don't talk about that with each other seems like just we're all very limited in terms of our time and attention, and that seems like a great way to save time and attention and get things right. And I've started to see a little bit more of that with online, but not even as much as I'd hope.
There is value in the struggle, and I worry about to the
Great point.
not to poo-poo that.
No,
I want that collaboration. I want to steal from the best of them. No, that's terrible terminology. I want to take ideas from the best of them, utilize what other theaters have developed, what works, and like great language and great ideas, and incorporate that in. But I know there seem to be two different kind of ways that theaters treat code of conduct or similar policies. One of them is we've begrudgingly met the requirement of having this because either a bad thing happened and we weren't ready for it, now we need something, or nothing bad has happened, but somebody who cares a lot about it has pushed us into it. So they tend towards copying something, drafting something from either an authoritarian perspective, like here's our idea, we don't need a lot of input, or we need something that looks good enough, copy paste. Replace the theater name, call it a day, and hope you didn't miss anything like that. And that kind of developed code of conduct tends towards being on like the back burner of the mind of those in the organization. And the ones that have struggled through it tend to have it more at their forefront and more in their core. So even, I know Huge has borrowed from I want to say Rise Comedy, the Improv Bill of Rights, one of my favorite things ever. The Improv Bill of Rights, fantastic thing to have in your code of conduct, I think, because it's the most positive section of any code of conduct. Because it's the list of things you can do, as opposed to things being the list of things you can't do, rightly so or not. Like they struggled through it and they found something that works for them, and they've really put in the work, and it's really forefront of their minds. And I see that come through in any teacher I've ever taken a workshop from that originated out of Huge. And I've had, I think, 10 or 15 people out of Huge that have taught me. And they've all had a very similar ethos, a very similar like forefront. Even where communities don't necessarily have like a pre-speech for workshops and other less formal things, they'll be like, okay, here's our boundaries for the day. Any additions to it, we can do a check-in, any limitations, any needs, any whatever. And they always take care to do that properly. And I feel like that comes from the struggle. So I want to be able to share those ideas. But if it becomes boilerplate, it tends to become, oh yeah, we have that. Okay, cool. I can stop devoting any mental energy to that.
That's a great call out. I mean, there's like, I expect there would be this bifurcation. You'd have the theaters that already care about this stuff would use that as a tool to like share each other's like experience and struggles and work through those conversations to learn. And then you'd have people who would be like, oh yeah, copy paste. That's great. Which is exactly what you don't want. So that's a really, really good perspective.
And the other thing is sometimes just like the model is so wonky, it's really hard to make work just like by copy pasting a
totally. It doesn't work.
The traditional model, as we have learned second, third, or fourth hand through like the UCBs of the world, is you just build a big school and that pays for everything else, which loses money. Of course, you build a big school and you get enough that you can buy a liquor license, and then you have a bar, and the bar pays for everything, and the classes pay for the profits, and then you lose money. Or sometimes a coffee shop or some other odd add-on business. But it's like there's so many ways to kind of crack that nut. I want best practices to figure out how to shortchange mistakes, shortchange lessons learned. Get ahead of problems personally. That's kind of the person I am. I want to.
Likewise,
if I'm going to put the time to make something happen, I want to make it the best thing that we can at the time, so that it's good and that it's not just like, we check the box and hope that it's good enough for when we actually need to remember it exists.
it's at least feels like something that more and more theaters are engaging with those problems and
Yeah.
being more proactive. And I hope that continues. And there's a lot to figure out there still, it seems like. And one thing on that kind of score that I think has been really encouraging is I've seen people kind of bring this idea forward that improv isn't perfect, right? And like there can be this toxic positivity around improv, that improvisers are amazing people and they're all friendly and improv is a great thing to do and it's going to make you feel better. And that can make it really hard to talk about it when there's problems, because then you're kind of like, what, you don't like, it's not perfect. What you don't like improv? What's wrong? It couldn't be wrong. I feel like people are starting to break against that. Yeah, toxic yes and. Well, we can have a whole hour on that. Yeah,
We could.
yeah,
We could. I have deep-seated thoughts about that.
yes,
Yeah. I think yes and is the concept itself is not problematic, but the way most places teach it is
Yeah.
problematic because they don't speak to the negative enough, which tends to cause a negative bias in people's brains,
yes,
and that tends to enable predatory and bad things.
absolutely.
Things like
And yeah, and there needs to be a space for that conversation, right? There needs to be an acceptance that it hasn't been perfect, that there is work to do, and there will always be work to do to make improv as a better community. I've been kind of really trying to think through how to communicate some of those ideas, and something that keeps coming to mind over the last few months is, the inherent risk in improv as an art form compared to other art forms that like scripted theater or painting or whatever, in that it is being generated on the spot. And we need to accept that we are taking that risk, which can be, low stakes, like, oh, I hope I might say something that's not funny on stage and the audience will laugh, to quite high risk where I could say something hurtful or I could perpetuate an organization that's hurtful. And, there's a responsibility that comes along with that risk that I think more and more people are starting to get.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Oh, so many mistakes have been made on improv stages.
It's true.
So many. Ugh. Anyway,
Yes.
definitely is an area that most people need work on, and I think
Yeah.
for me personally, the language of yes and needs to be changed. I like agree and add more than
Yeah.
yes and, because so many people take yes and saying yes literally. Oh, I have to say yes to that. Oh,
Yeah.
you've set up something that I'm uncomfortable with. I
Yeah.
have to say yes to
Say
that.
yes,
Because
yeah.
yes and. Now I'm in a really uncomfortable scene and it shows, and I find that experience icky, and then I leave.
Yeah.
That's helping nobody. Agree and add. I like that language slightly better, but it's imperfect because then you can agree that it definitely was an offer and it definitely happened. You can add information more clearly.
Yeah.
I was talking about it in terms of like the improviser agreeing and adding
Yeah.
the character that doesn't necessarily have to align with. Or it's like, oh, you've said
Yeah.
something terrible. I agree, you have said something terrible. I'm going to tell you you're an
Yeah.
asshole.
Right. Well, this goes back to kind of the layers thing, right? I think that one of the challenges with agree and add or yes and or any of those things is that the depth of that skill can be quite advanced in those situations. And for a brand new improviser, it may be more appropriate to just say, if that's an uncomfortable offer, just end the scene. Like, and we're gonna train you to get better so that you don't have to do it that way. But don't, like, having somebody in their first improv class have to try and do that or navigate that, even if you're like a teacher explaining it in the moment, it's going to be very, very challenging for them who's just learning how to make up things on the spot for the first time. I think Shannon Stott has a great video on YouTube about like the 4 ways to, yes, exactly, to deal with the difficult offer. And the 4th one is just to end the scene. And that is almost like the original sin of yes and. It's like you can never end a scene, right? And that is really, really difficult and toxic. Like, and if we can teach improvisers that that's always an option, and yes, we're going to try and help you not have to use that tool, but it's always there. Like, I think that would go a long way to making things better.
Oh. such complicated feelings about this.
Yeah, yeah.
So, oh, I could talk to you for the next 4 hours about this if you want. There's something I've seen one of the most beautiful ways of calling someone out on stage ever.
Yeah,
Jill Bernard is saint and an angel. I was at a festival in another city. Jill Bernard was there. It was a team of teachers.
yeah,
I will not drop any other names because I'm just going to praise Jill Bernard for this. Somebody came out, they made a joke where it was punching down, where I forget if it was a disability or a race, but something in
yeah,
that regard. They made that the butt of the joke. They made that the punchline in a scene.
yeah.
Immediately afterwards, Jill Bernard comes out. She initiates the scene. She calls that person back out on stage, and she's like, she puts in an imaginary VHS tape into a TV, and somebody on the sidelines cued into where she was at and started doing "I Love Lucy" like as a like theme coming out of the TV.
Whoa.
And Jill Bernard's like, "You see that? The joke is they're women. They're women, and they're doing things. That's what our parents laughed at." And then like proceeds to just like rip that person
Whoa.
a new butthole on stage beautifully in a way that was very showy in terms of
Yeah,
like being a show, being very theatrical, but also
yeah,
very poignant and very clear in that like this is not okay. This is not what we stand for.
yeah,
And I am jealous of that because I do not
yeah.
have that skill yet.
It's amazing.
Um,
Yeah,
but I'm also aware that if I try to, I feel like personally, if I try to push people to that skill, that feels like that will feel like to people that I can quit a scene, but I still shouldn't. And you
mm,
should.
that's tough.
Improv
That's true.
is
Yeah,
not worth it. If you are
right.
uncomfortable, if you do not like it, if you do not feel safe, if there's any of these things that are
Yeah,
like, nope, improv almost nowhere pays for you to
yeah,
perform,
right.
which is its own set of problems.
Yeah,
But like, even if it paid, there's only so much you'll do for whatever amount of money you're going to get from it.
yeah,
It's not worth it. If your safety is there, you can quit. Doesn't
yeah,
matter how many years of experience with it is.
yeah,
Doesn't matter what they've done. Doesn't matter who it is, where you are. You can be like, I'm out of this scene and just leave.
yeah,
Done. Who cares? You can sleep. And I worry
right.
sometimes about if you bake things in that you
Mm,
have an implicit bias against something, whereas that
right.
is the pinnacle. Take care of yourself.
Yeah,
I try to emphasize that. Take care of yourself out there as best you can. Do what you need
yeah,
to do. Please don't like fist fight back or anything like that. But, like, take care of yourself. Do what you need to feel safe. End a scene. Edit. Call it out in a scene. Do whatever. Break the fourth wall. Apologize.
mhm,
Say something. Whatever that is. I don't care what it is. Do what you feel is appropriate there.
yeah,
We'll figure it out, and we'll go from there. And so, like, I don't know. I have complicated feelings. Ideally, I would love everybody to have that skill that I saw in Joe Bernard because I'm jealous of that skill. I want
me
that
too.
skill to be able
Yeah,
to call people out like that, and not just for like the joy of calling someone out, more so just like for being able to do it immediately, readily, and in a way that still is entertaining and still can engage
yeah,
people into that message. Not necessarily, who cares if that person actually learned from it?
right.
They were a teacher, so it's for the best if they learned from it. But
Yeah,
like there was a bunch of people in that room that got to see that and got to take that
yeah,
lesson away from it. And if even two people in that audience learned to question something, to grow from something,
right.
from that,
Amazing. Right. Yeah. Well, and exactly. And that's why it's a leveling up, right? It's not just taking care of yourself, it's taking care of the audience and potentially using that as a teaching moment, which is to your point, above and beyond. Like it is not necessary. It is if you want to try and do that, Godspeed, good for you. But to your point, yeah, I love that mantra of just take care of yourself. And we should say that more often and more explicitly in improv.
yeah, I have tried to incorporate as many lessons as I can. I think one of the most succinct ones was I had a teacher whose opening was take care of yourself, take care of each other, then take care of the space in that order.
Mm,
That was a weird clown class, but it was fun. But
yeah.
that stuck with me. I've had so many other things stick with me, and I've been slowly gluing them into
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. That's what we're all doing, right? Always learning, always trying to integrate those things together. So, well, wow, that's a great, I think, moment to end on, if that's all right with you. I think a wonderful journey, and thank you for all the insights in the conversation. It's nice to do it in a set of rectangles as opposed to a set of smaller Facebook-shaped rectangles with comments. And I hope we get to do this again online and someday in person.
Yeah,
That'd be
definitely.
really, really enjoyable. We've been ending these with a plug and a shout out. So if you could tell folks where they can find you or your theater, whatever you'd like to promote, that's great. And I'd love to hear somebody you think we should talk to in the future who's doing great things in improv.
Okay, cool. I'll get the messy, ugly, pluggy business out of the way. On Facebook, I'm William Rowe. That's where I'm most active. I'm on other social media, mostly as a lurker, so you don't need to ever find me on any of those things. It won't matter. It'll be boring. Lancaster Improv Players is the name of the theater that I'm the treasurer for. We're on Facebook and Instagram. We stream on Twitch, our shows. We have a workshop coming up this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That is $25. It is being taught by Master Buono. It's being taught by a teacher from Elizabethtown College who does not get on the circuit much. So
cool.
It'll be fun and fascinating. We could use a few more signups for that. If you're so inclined and interested, please do. Terry Master Buono. I didn't even find the tab that's on, and I remember the name. It's on characters in short form. We'd love to have anybody there who's willing to come and join and learn and play with us for a while. We like guests. We like playing with them. We like learning together. And to shout out other people. Ooh, so many people. I love Stephanie. I'm sure you've noticed her. I love PGraph. They're amazing. I'm sure you've already talked to them or aware of them. I don't have anybody particular.
That's okay.
River is amazing too.
Yes.
They're names that you just find all over the place. So I feel like I'm just cheering the crowd favorites already.
That's okay. It's funny how many names I now like. There's so many people I've never met that I know them. I know their names. Like I recognize them. I can tell you about them, but I've never seen their face in person. It's very interesting. I am really looking forward to the wave of in-person festivals that will happen, where I will be able to be like, you're from Facebook.
That is one of my favorite experiences at a festival. Is ever since like the fourth festival I've been to out of all 36, I have run into at least one person that I've seen at a different festival. Typically that I did not know was going to be there. So it's fun how small the world can be sometimes, and to have that special joy of being like, I knew
the connection.
It's not like going back to the same festival necessarily. It's not like, you were here last year. It's I saw you in Ohio.
Exactly. We're both into this so much that we found each other at two non-local events.
Sometimes two different countries.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. This was lovely. Thank you for the shout outs and for the conversation. And find Will and Lancaster Improv Players on the internet and see them in other places. They do many amazing things. And join us back here on Highwire Improv for shows 7 days a week. Walk the talk sometimes, typically on Wednesdays. And until next time, we will see you very soon.